Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. BAM weather meteorologist Brett Waltz here, giving you a long-range forecast update, guys. I hope y'all are doing well this morning. We have an updated look at the pattern as we go throughout the first half of September, and then also an updated forecast for Hurricane Erin, which continues to churn in the Atlantic, and then key notes on what is to come behind Erin as we work towards the end of this month. So be sure to stay tuned for that as well. But let's start out with the latest visible satellite imagery and forecast for Hurricane Erin, down to a Category 2 storm this morning. So it has continued to weaken some. If you look at the satellite here, you can see really no noticeable eye here at this point. It's weakened, so the eye is closed up a little bit. If we look, we still have maximum sustained winds of 109 miles per hour, gust of 138 miles per hour. As we work into tomorrow and Erin starts to curve eastward, you can see could potentially get back up to Cat 3 status, 115 mile per hour winds and 138 mile per hour wind gusts as it begins to curve. And you can see all the way up off the east coast here, beginning to weaken a little bit as we work into your Thursday and then into your Thursday night Category 2 status before weakening to a Category 1 when it's well away from the U.S. coast. Now, there has been a consistent westward tick in the guidance as we've moved closer and closer to Erin working towards the east coast of the United States. Now, what you see here in the blue shade, that is the cone of uncertainty. So at this point, even your furthest west track is still a good bit off the east coast of the United States, but it could certainly get close enough to provide some impacts in terms of wind and in terms of storm surge and waves along the Outer Banks, maybe even up towards, the east coast of Virginia and Maryland here, as it recurves Wednesday and into Thursday just off of the East Coast. If we take a look here at the latest storm surge forecast, up to 4 feet in some spots in the Outer Banks, certainly on the table here, guys, and then closer to the inland areas here, 1 to 2 feet possible. Same thing up into southeast Virginia. So could have some minor flooding issues along the coastal areas here related to the storm surge of Hurricane Erin, and could also have potentially, if we go back here and look, we do have tropical storm watches in effect. We've got storm surge watches in effect, and so could have some tropical storm level wind gusts as Erin passes by to the east as well. Now, in terms of the storm behind it, here's the latest look at the European ensembles. We saw a major shift yesterday afternoon in what model guidance was indicating this is going to do. If you recall, yesterday, while there was a spread, there were members up here, there were members over here. We were monitoring at the very least for a little bit more of a westward track compared to where Erin went. But the trend overnight and yesterday afternoon, major eastward tick to the east in pretty much all of the different ensembles. Now, that's very important for a couple of reasons. Number one, obviously, it means that the chances of a U.S. impact are much lower the next 10 days, which is some good news for our friends in the southeastern part of the country. However, it also impacts the overall United States pattern. A further west track typically will pump up warmth and a ridge of high pressure to the north, and that would have favored the warmer idea coming back, as we had talked about. There is some support for warmth returning to the forecast, and if we had a westward moving hurricane or tropical system towards the Gulf, that would certainly aid in that. And that's one of the reasons we thought yesterday data was maybe a little bit too cold. If we get a storm that moves far enough west, it tends to favor warmth. But a storm this far east will instead pump up warmth and heights towards Greenland, which allows for more cold fronts to come down here across the eastern part of the country. And that's exactly how data trended. This was yesterday afternoon's trend on the EPS. I think a lot of what's going on in the pattern right now is related to some tropical activity. There are a couple of other pattern drivers that have supported the cold fronts, no doubt about that. But in terms of it being a little more notable, a little bit more extended especially, I think what's going on in the Atlantic definitely having an impact on things. So again, The trend, and I think where we need to go with the forecast here, is the cooler air lingering on a little bit longer than we had originally anticipated, and we reflected that this morning in our outlook for the next 2 weeks. So really the core of the cooler air coming late this weekend through the middle part to latter part of next week, kind of that 6 to 10 day time frame, the coolest stretch, if you will. But with it lingering a little bit longer, you can see both the week 1 and the week 2 period generally, I would say, a cooler lean, certainly compared to where we have been with most of the warmth in the western portion of the country. That also has implications on precipitation. We've got some messy chances in the cards over the next 7 days if we zoom in here. But the majority of the storm track and the heavier rain down across the mountain west and the far southwest plains. Overall, this is a relatively inactive forecast, and that persists into the week 2 time frame. There's the opportunity for a little bit more moisture as we work into the middle to latter part of the week 2 time frame, especially once the next tropical system has passed. But this type of suppression, this type of cooler air does tend to favor a drier than normal threat for the Midwest and the primary growing regions. And so overall, it's a cooler and a less active forecast over the next 2 weeks for the Midwest, North Central U.S., Ohio Valley, probably getting more active across the southern and the southwestern plains. Taking a look at this in a little bit more detail, here's a look at the temperature anomalies as we go over the next 10 days. You can see in the short term, there's still definitely some warmth in here, but slowly but surely, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we begin to moderate that, and then the big cold front comes in as we work into the weekend. Take a look at that. Temperatures well below normal Sunday and into Monday. We're talking about temperatures, guys, 10 to 12 degrees below normal in a pretty widespread fashion. This is a notable cold front, almost more of what you would see from a recurving typhoon, but we have not had that in this particular case. And that's going to linger around all the way out through the 28th and probably even beyond that. If we take a look at just some of our high temperatures, take a look at this as we work into Saturday, Sunday, Monday, widespread 70s, even some 60s in the upper Midwest. It's going to feel phenomenal, really, as we get into next week, and those low temperatures even getting down into perhaps the 40s and 50s across parts of the upper Midwest. You can see some 40s down into parts of Iowa, even some low 40s in northern Wisconsin. So again, a much cooler air mass working in. And again, if we take a look at some of the data as we go through the extended range here, we can see the big area of cooler air in the trough come in as we go into next week. And while maybe not as amplified, not as strong all the way through the end of the month, you can see there's the tendency to continue to dip down at least cooler to more seasonable air across the Midwest and the Great Lakes through the end of the month. And again, I think part of that has to do with what's going on in the tropics. The question then becomes, heading into weeks 3 and 4, okay, well, the idea has been for us to get quite a bit warmer again. There's no doubt about that. How do these trends in the short to medium term impact things down the road? I think, number one, certainly the warmth is not going to come back as fast. The original idea was at the end of August and to start September, especially around the first of the month. I think it's probably going to be a little bit after that at this point, probably especially into the second week of the month, maybe the 5th or after, let's say. The other thing we need to keep an eye on, differences in what's going on in the tropical forcing. If you recall, last Friday we talked about the data trying to move our tropical forcing into MJO phases 4, 5, and even potentially phase 6. Those are very warm phases heading into the month of September. The data over the past couple of days has really struggled, but what they have seen is a weaker trend in our tropical forcing and a stall here, kind of more so into MJO phases 2 and 3. CFS is more into 2, say the GEFS probably a little bit more 3, say 2, 3 is kind of where we're going to be at based off of the upper level signals that I see. Taking a look here, that means that our top matches are a little bit different, but a familiar year popped up this morning. It was more so into phase 3, but we saw late August into September a stall and a weakening of the MJO in phases 2 and into 3 in 2021. It's been one of our top analogs for a long time. It's one of our top analogs heading into fall. And if we take a look at what happened during this period, I could certainly see something like this happening, where maybe at the very beginning of the period, there's cooler air lingering around across the Midwest, Great Lakes, and the East Coast. And then with time, this warmth will have the tendency to bleed from west to east. I really think that's probably how this is going to play out, because I do still see plenty of warm signals. Our global winds, that is a warm signal. East Asia's got a big warm signal. The North Pacific has a warm signal. So I don't want to completely back off that idea. I think it's a deal where we're probably just a little bit more delayed, and we certainly need to keep an eye on how tropical activity trends down the road as well. In terms of precipitation, this should look familiar. Our September outlook has been not quite as active. It generally here, if I can break it down, it's a very messy look, is generally kind of more active in this region in here, parts of the Mountain West and towards the Northwest Plains, a little bit less active Tennessee Valley into parts of the Ohio Valley. If we take a look here, blending the ideas together, some kind of MJO phase 2 and 3, weaker than normal global wind, that's been the theme for a while. I like this type of idea. I think that it highlights that, especially to start the period, the core of the warmth is probably going to be west. It's probably going to be west, out in parts of the Mountain West, but with time probably bleeding a little bit further to the east. I would say that the precipitation signal is a lot messier. I didn't even put phase 3 on here because it's very polluted with tropical activity, which just highlights that we're going to have to continue to watch that. It may remain more active. But this tends to favor some moisture across the western plains, a little bit drier south and east, maybe even parts of the Midwest. But generally, I wouldn't say it's soaked across the majority of the ag belt. If I look at the phase 3 analog just from more of a broad sense, you can see that it, again, maybe some moisture, messy moisture in the plains, does favor some drier risk in the eastern ag belt, which has been the idea. The other thing I will note, just from a timing perspective, our SOI had another drop overnight. Does tend to favor another cold front in here around the 3rd or the 4th of the month. And that would also favor the idea that some cooler air could linger for a time. And so again, I think first 5 to 7 days of September, probably not all that warm. Probably cooler to more seasonable in the eastern part of the country based off this trend. But beyond that, I still favor some of the warmth and maybe even some additional heat to try to return from west to east. And so we tried to blend that out as best as we could. Start of this period, probably a little bit cooler for the Midwest, ag belt as a whole, warming up with time, with this warmth in the west beginning to shift a little bit further to the east. Now, if we feel more of that phase 2 idea, there's a cooler risk in here. There's no doubt about that, and that will have to be something that we keep an eye on. In terms of moisture, again, I do think that there's a messy tendency to things. I don't think we're bone dry, but I don't think we're soaked either. I think that as we talked about, there's going to be a tendency for moisture in the Mountain West, Western Plains, probably a little bit drier through the Ohio Valley, parts of the eastern ag belt. In between, I wouldn't say bone dry, but I wouldn't say substantially wet, certainly compared to where we've been across the Midwest. Here's that risk that I talked about if we're more phase 2 than phase 3. It would just keep really the late August pattern lingering around longer. Certainly a cooler risk here, but at the same time, phase 3 is warmer, and so we just blended it the best that we could. And just have to highlight the risk and monitor which way we lean. Again, right now, I like this idea. I think it blends things together well. It kind of at least factors in some of the warm signals from the global winds, but there are risks and subsequently a little bit lower than normal forecast confidence. And you can see there's also support for the warm-up from the North Pacific. We mentioned that as well. So that's the idea as things stand right now. Guys, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I know we're getting into an important time of the year with harvest. Breaking down some of these precipitation details will be critical, and we'll be keeping an eye as we go further into September on frost and freeze risks as well. Thanks, guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.